Hello and welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Ben. Hi Ben, how we doing?
Manny, we're doing great. Thank you for having me.
No, it's all good. We've kind of been talking off camera a little bit, but if you just give us a little background on who you are, what you do, and how you got to the position you're in.
Sure. So I am an assistant performance enhancement coach at the University of Arizona at the moment. Uh, I work with a handful of teams, including women's tennis, the men's and women's swim teams, large groups there. So my co-coach Dana Munoz and we kind of tag team that group. I also work with the track and field sprinters, and I assist our director of performance, Jim Krempos, with the baseball program because they're a large group as well. And
Nice.
then, as far as my background, prior to my time at University of Arizona, we're going on year 3 now at the University of Arizona. It's flown by. But prior to being in the collegiate setting, I was actually entirely private sector. So, going back about 8, 9 years working in the private sector, entirely private training facilities that had more of a emphasis on performance development for athletes and teams. I had a lot of work there with youth athletes all the way up to collegiate athletes. The occasional professional athlete was in there, but primarily my work in the private sector was youth athletes from ages 13 and up all the way up to collegiate levels. And I had a great experience there working with a wide array of different athletes of different sports, both male and female. I had my niche sports like football, wrestling, ice hockey, lacrosse, soccer, wrestling. Uh, but I had exposure to almost every sport under the sun when I was in the private sector, from all those sports that I just mentioned to even Irish dance. And so I kind of attribute a lot of my coaching skill set to those early experiences, kind of getting a wide exposure to all different types of athletes, all ability levels, all different stages in their development, from sports that all have a wide array of demands.
As a strength coach, we deal a lot with Excel's, spreadsheets, and building out the best program that we can for our athletes. Although, when you have these large amount of spreadsheets and Excels and printables and packs that you need to hand out to your athletes, it can get a little bit overwhelming, especially with large amount of files. Mine's personally has crashed, deleted, and that to me is a big burden. That's why since starting my own business, I've went with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all-in-one programming software that has truly changed and leveled up the way I coach and the way I program for my athletes. With TeamBuildr, you can create customizable workouts, track your athletes' progress in real time, and even generate performance reports with just a few clicks. Athletes can also fill out their own workout data by using either the tablet or their smartphones in the weight room, which, most importantly, eliminates the paperwork that we all hate. This also gives your athletes accountability for their program and their progress as they are immersed within it. If you are interested in using TeamBuildr, head over to teambuildr.com and sign up using code PAChalkup. That's PACHALKUP to start your 30-day free trial. Yeah, I'm always fascinated with people that come from a general background and sort of these more general population type facilities where you have to really hone in on your soft skills to be able to communicate and bring in athletes into your program, and b still maintain them for, because that's essentially your job, so you're only getting paid if they're there. How have you
Yeah.
found going from like a private facility to now collegiate sports settings?
I've loved it. It's been a fun, exciting transition, full of new challenges. I mean, at least in the weight room, at the end of the day, movement is movement. training and energy systems is the same there. Training and energy systems doesn't change. Still trying to develop all the different athletic qualities of all the different sports, but there's just little nuances that are a little bit different in the collegiate
Mm,
setting versus the private sector. You're a lot more involved with the support team in the collegiate setting. Obviously, I'm way more involved with the athletes' sport coaches.
mhm,
I'm way more involved with the athletic trainers. Um, you're very much more a part of a more collaborative team in the collegiate setting, whereas in the private sector, you're working with the athlete, and you're really also working with their parents
mhm.
because they're the ones paying the bills, right? They're the ones. They have to be happy with what you're doing there too. Um, so, in the collegiate setting, you're obviously not really dealing with the athlete's parents. You're instead of the parent, you're now more so dealing with their sport coach, and you have to make sure you have a good relationship with the sport coach. You're putting time into developing the trust and the rapport with them,
Mhm.
and helping develop that buy-in, and helping making sure they understand uh, you know what you're doing in the weight room, and they see why you're doing it and why you're doing what you're doing in the weight room and how it's going to help their team and help them be
Yeah.
successful.
With the differences between sort of not so having this relationship with the head coach and when you're in a private setting not having that connection always, because you there is some coaches that I've heard that have that nice connection with the coaches and they go back and forward in a private setting. How did you manage to deal with those challenges of building that rapport with the coaches now at the collegiate setting due to the private?
Sure. So it just kind of started with um, you know showing them, doing things to show them that you are bought in to and invested into their team that you're working with. Um, doing things like obviously going to their practices and showing face there, and doing everything you can to learn about their sport, and from not just the movements that they're doing, not just the types of stressors that are occurring during their practices, but also, kind of really understanding their lingo,
Mhm,
understanding their culture, understanding their world, and really putting yourself into their arena of comfort, if you will. And I would say that's one of the first steps that I had to do to start developing that rapport and that relationship with them, and building that trust, and showing them that I'm here for them. I'm not just a meathead that lives in a
mhm,
weight room, and I'll see you when you come in here, and that's it. And all I care about is what happens in this weight room. When they see that I'm really truly invested in them, not just the sport coach, but really also the athletes too.
mhm.
That's the start of kind of changing the game as far as the relationship goes.
Yeah.
And having consistent communication with them, daily, asking questions, asking questions about, you know, where are we strong? Where are we weak? What do we really need to work on? What do we struggle with? Ask
Mhm,
questions, get as much information as you possibly can, because then they know then that you are informed, you're starting to understand their world, and the bet more that you can understand their world, and they see that, they're going to start to trust you more, and be able to kind of allow you to, I guess, make those programming decisions in the weight room, because maybe you already do know a lot about their world and their sport, and the demands and the injury risks, and what are we trying to get, but they don't necessarily know what you know until you kind
mhm.
of
Bring it out,
start
yeah.
doing those things.
I recently was at a facility in Ireland, and that's something that I think they're struggling with a lot is that communication between coaches and sort of committee members, and they're not able to bring the athletes into the weight room because they're still stuck in that mentality that it makes you slow, it makes you gain a bunch of weight that you don't need, and it just hinders performance. So for me, it's always that thing where it's how can we break that barrier between this old mindset of coaching and really bring out that look, that's actually a myth. We can actually get them more explosive, faster, stronger, and still be able to
Yep.
keep going the whole game. So, like, so I've been invited to come back just to work on that aspect of it, like communicating from coaches to committee members to be like, hey, they actually need it. Like, it's that important. So for me, that is a very important thing to really get down, and how we're able to sort of effectively communicate with the coach, because you're 100% right. If they don't trust that you know what they're up to and what they need from their athletes, they're going to be like, yeah, just avoid the weight room, it's fine.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it could, who knows why that might be their stance initially. Maybe maybe they vote there, it's a sport coach that, for example, maybe in the case of track and field, where there's a
Mm,
strong possibility that that track coach at one point in time oversaw the strength and conditioning work. You know, that's kind of, they're kind of used, maybe even used to having that as their responsibilities. That's their area. They see that as, and, or maybe it's a sport coach that has in the past at some point in time had a bad experience with a strength and conditioning coach for one reason or another. And, you know, there's, if there's that resistance there, if there's that disconnect, if there's that blockage or barrier or resistance, you know, there's usually a reason why. And the more
mhm.
you can do to communicate and build that relationship and build that understanding, that's where it's all going to start, and you're going to be able to make a much more positive impact on the athletes when you start doing taking care of things communication wise and building that trust.
It all comes from that, I think. So it's a hurling team, which is an Irish specific sport, but a lot of what they do has to be like fast and explosive, but also it's very physical. Like, I would compare it to like rugby, American football. Like, they're constantly like
Okay.
either hitting each other or hitting each other with sticks. So it's like it's wild. I watched my first game. I was
Sounds like my kind of
like,
sport.
damn. I'll send you videos afterwards. Um,
Please do.
but it's this whole thing where they're stuck in a very old school way where by not doing gym work, you actually get better. Just focus on actually playing the sport. So,
By not doing gym
and
work, you said?
yeah, yeah. So like obviously the speed work's really important, and with you having sort of track athletes and field and sports that require a lot of movement speed, how do you sort of include and incorporate these movements into your programs?
These sport specific movements?
Not so much. I don't believe in sport specific. I think it's
Okay.
bollocks. You could, if you want someone to run faster, get them to run faster.
Yeah,
This, um,
agreed.
but how do you work on their sort of speed development and power outputs?
Sure. Uh, I mean, I work a lot of different methods into my training program. Now, before I kind of keep going with that, I'm very much, my programs are very principle driven. I'm
Mm,
not method driven. I'm very principle driven. At the end of the day, uh, you know, principle wise, I'm going after three main things. I'm going after building better movement. I'm going after building better resiliency, and and I'm going after building better capacities, no matter what the sport is. Um, and so whatever we're doing in the weight room, we're trying whatever we're doing in the weight room, we're addressing at least one or a combination of those three things. And whether it's emphasizing one like movement or emphasizing resiliency development or capacities, it shouldn't be contradicting or compromising the other. It should all be kind of pushing the needle forward in some regard, either directly or indirectly for all three. So as far as developing power outputs, strength that they need for their sport, that's going to actually transfer their sport. I'm actually going to start with the nervous system, and
mm.
so with all of our with all the warm ups that I work in with my groups, we do something during the warm up that's going to address some neural prep work, and we have a series of different exercises and methods that we'll start to implement. I incorporate RPR with all my groups. We work in different eye drills, like isocods that are going to help have a positive impact on our vestibular system, different eye drills that might have a positive impact on our visual system.
Can you explain what they
We're going to
are?
Sure. Where would you like me to the RPR or?
Yeah, we'll just go one after the other. So the RPR and then the I drills.
Sure. So now, before I start diving into this stuff, here's my disclaimer. I am not a neurologist. I don't have all the terminology and lingo down. I just understand the practical side of it. So if I butcher any of these terminologies, or I don't have the exact deep details of the science of this stuff, and it's very deep and very heavy and very complex, that's my disclaimer.
Nah, you're good. You're
So,
good.
so with RPR, it's essentially a system of neurological wake up drills that I, the coach, teaches to the athletes to be able to self perform on themselves. So once they've been taught this, they don't need me for it. I've given them a tool to, and I've given something that's going to empower themselves for their performance prep, whether it's for the lift, the practice, or the actual competition. And so it's a system of neurological wake up drills using deep digital pressure with your fingers, your digits, on targeted tissue areas on your body that are going to interact with certain given motor reflexes in your body. And with this deep digital pressure on these target areas, what's going to result is we're going to start to increase the speed of the synaptic delivery in those areas and the bandwidth of that delivery. Um, and it's going to have an incredible positive change, mobility wise, flexibility wise, strength wise, and even power output wise. Really, even balance and stability as well. It's also going to have a positive impact on your resting heart rate. And so we'll start with that. Maybe we don't do the whole gamut of all the possible neurological wake up drills that we could do, but we'll have like maybe a series of 4 that we go through that are going to give us the best bang for our buck. It's kind of like just general base level type resets, and then kind of go from there. Later, if they're really into it, I'll give them the full gamut of the rest of the resets for all the other muscle groups. And so they have that in their toolbox. They'd like to do that individually on their own before practices or swim meets. And now, in addition to all those benefits to the wake up drills that I just mentioned, I would say the number one thing that's helping us with is help offset any compensation patterns that we've developed over
Mm,
time. And
yeah.
obviously, like, most of us know that like athletes are really good compensators. And usually, I would say most of the time, if not all the time, the better the athlete, the better compensator they
Yeah.
are, right? And so RPR is our way of offsetting that, kind of resetting that compensation pattern. So we're truly firing, muscular wise, neuromuscular wise, in a correct pattern that's going to help us perform optimally. I always use the analogy with either when I'm explaining this to the athletes or the sport coaches, because I get them on board with this too. If the sport coaches don't understand this or aren't bought into it, it's going to be an uphill battle. So I always start with them. Once they understand it and see it with the benefits of it, then we introduce it to the team. But I use the example of like a squat. I think all of us, if we've been in the field long enough, we've all experienced either the athlete or the client that always experiences a tight back when they squat,
Mm,
or maybe always experiences a tight back when they deadlift. And assuming their form visually, optics looks correct, like the form looks great, but I can't figure out why they just always feel it in their back. Well, maybe instead of the glutes being the primary mover of these foundational movement patterns, maybe it's actually the erectors. Maybe it's instead of going glutes, hamstrings, erectors, maybe it's going erectors, hamstrings, glutes, completely opposite. And it doesn't matter how good of a coach we are, how good our cues are, if we can't do something to help positively change that compensation pattern, we're going to be we're facing an uphill battle with that, and it's just going to lead to a lot of frustration, both on the coach's
yeah.
side and the athlete's side.
How long does it take to sort of teach them the system?
So day one in the weight room, or I shouldn't say day one, the first week that they're in, as we're kind of working them through their pre-train, beginning of the year testing, we will teach them RPR. It usually takes me, if I'm doing a good job explaining it, and I also like to give them perform pre and post tests with this. So I'll have, volunteers come up, we'll test a certain, muscle action. Maybe we're testing arm strength, or maybe we're testing hip flexion or hip extension, or maybe we're testing hamstring strength, abs, abdominal strength. We'll do a thing where we're testing the strength, we do the reset, and then we test it again, so they can see the
Mm,
difference. Their teammates can also witness that difference as well. So that's we're teaching them, but we're also developing that buy-in for the system, or the method. Um, and we're just kind of picking different people in the group to come up, test it, do the reset, retest it, and so everybody's kind of seeing how it's feeling, or at least seeing what it's doing positively to their teammates. I will also Everyone will do kind of what we call establishing a baseline, even
mm,
if they're not doing the muscle tests like before and afters. Before we even do any of this stuff, I'm going to have them do 3 bodyweight squats. They're going to do 3 toe touches with an overhead reach. They're going to do 3 trunk rotations right to left, just to get an idea of how they're feeling right out of the gate. And then at the end of all of this, after they perform, after they've gone through all the resets, they'll do all that again, and they're just like, dang, it's either a combination of I have way more mobility and it's way easier to hit these ranges, or I just feel smoother with everything,
mm.
or I just feel, one of my track athletes, freshman or first time coming into the weight room, he's a transfer for us. He said, I just got this spring in my step that I don't typically have
Wow.
at this point in the day. I just, and it's just like, we haven't done anything. We haven't done a single stretch. We haven't done a single dynamic movement to increase have some sort of thermogenic response in a positive direction. We've just done these reset drills. And so, sorry, that's a little long winded,
No,
but
that's all
when
good.
it's all said and done, it usually takes us, 15, 20 minutes, because I don't like to skip. I want them to really get a good idea of what we're doing and the power of it. 15, 20 minutes, and then they got it. And then from there on out, it's usually going to take us 60 to 75 seconds to get through the 4 reset drills. And then we start going into mobility, flexibility, and dynamic warm up for on a typical lift day. And we
What?
do that first thing right out of the gate, because that's going to have a positive, that's going to only help us get even more out of the mobility work that we do and the flexibility work.
Yeah. What's the reset drills that you do?
So it's always going to start with breathing, right? We're going to be belly breathing. So we'll do a series of belly breaths, and then we go right into a diaphragm reset. So we're starting right with the diaphragm, and that's going to help reset any sort of inefficient breathing patterns. Because if our breathing is off, that's going to have a negative global effect on everything else. So we got to get our breathing right. I tell them, belly breathing and optimal breathing patterns is kind of like the straw that stirs the drink for our PR. And so what we start with that, even with just a diaphragm reset, that's going to have a positive impact on flexibility and strength right out of the gate, even if we haven't done the resets for those
Hmm.
areas. We'll do a diaphragm reset. We'll then go into a psoas reset, kind of low in the deep abdomen, and that's going to be responsible for optimal hip flexion action. Um, that's ideally, we want that psoas to be the neurological driver of that hip flexion. And then we'll go into hip extension. So we'll do the psoas, we'll do the glutes to help us with our hip extension, and then we'll do the ab reset. So we got our diaphragm wake up, we have our psoas wake up, and we have our glute wake up, and then finishing with the ab wake up.
Mm.
And we'll just do those those 4 resets.
There's quite a lot. Am I correct in saying there's a lot of sort of like yoga based techniques that you do during these warm ups as well?
As far as like mobility and stuff,
Mobility and the sort of breathing techniques and getting them prepped for a higher movement patterns.
a little bit. I mean, honestly, like, as far as what we do breathing wise, we're honestly only doing just 5 belly breaths, and we're doing
Okay.
5 belly breaths, and we're breathing. We're doing we're performing that breathing. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, and we have our hand just below the belly button as a tactile cue
Hmm.
to help remind us where we want that air going. We want that air going down into the belly, not up in here into the chest. And so that hand is just a tactile reminder. That's where we want that air to go. We should feel that tummy expanding into the hand, full, nice, long, relaxed inhales in through the nose and out through the mouth. And so once they got those 5 belly breaths, then we're off and running with the resets. And each reset is going to take about 10 to 15 seconds, if that.
Yeah. In terms of sort of session, how long do you have your athletes for during each session?
So most of the sessions are going to be 1 hour long. Team to team, day to day, that might vary by 15 minutes. Some of them might be just 45 minutes. Some of them might be an hour and 15 minutes. But typically they're going to be an hour long.
Yeah. Is there so how do you structure it to include this like 15-minute, and then how do you structure the whole program after that as well?
Um, the 15-minute RPR. Or so like if I'm taking, so when we're teaching them the RPR at the very beginning of the year, the first week, we're doing it on a day where there's not necessarily an entire full lift occurring.
Right. Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
we're still kind of teaching them just general movement patterns. It's a lighter day, so we have that time built in to
Mhm.
teach them that. But that's only going to be just one day during at some point during that first week.
So this is something that they would do prior to coming in and lifting.
Prior to we're going to teach them the RPR methods and the other neural prep methods that first week. That first week is really dedicated to kind of teaching them this stuff, getting them through the beginning of the year testing, just kind of orientation stuff with the gym. But once we're through that first week, that neural prep work is taken, 4 or 5 minutes total,
Okay.
and of that 4 or 5 minutes total, it's the RPR is really only taking a minute to a minute 15 seconds of that.
Right. Okay. Because when
Mhm.
you said 10 to 15 minutes, I thought like 10
No,
to 15
no, no, no.
minutes of your session is spent
That's
on this. And I was like, damn,
no way.
that's
No
efficient.
way. That would not be, if it took 15 minutes every day, we're not using it, no matter how good it is. Yeah, or at least we're not going to use it during a lift. We'll teach
Mm,
them it, and then they can do it on their own if that's what it takes. But no, once we teach them, we just take our time with teaching them it.
mm,
But once we teach them and they understand it, it's occurring in a minute 15 seconds or less. And even further, we're only going to do it with them for maybe the first 3 weeks to know that they for sure have it. And we're
mm.
also going to we also assign uh, team captains to lead it, and we make sure they understand how to lead it. And so eventually, once we're kind of 3 weeks into this, this is something that they are doing before us, myself, or if it's myself and another coach leading the session, they're knocking it out before we even start with them. So they're kind of
Yeah.
working it into their foam rolling time before we actually start. And so now it's taking no time away from our actual lift.
Yeah. No, that's what I was thinking because, like, with collegiate sports, like, there's already a limited time that you're in actual
Yes.
contact with them. So that process needs to be as efficient as possible. Like, when I was at
Yep.
UW, and I've said this multiple times, like, we would set up for lifts the day before. So as soon as they came in to lift, they just ran through the lift. As soon as they were out, we'd set up for the next lift coming in, and that's how sort of we managed everything to keep track of everyone's times, because they had, I think it was something like 55 minutes to lift, and then they were straight on the field, and then the other group would come in. So it's very, very, like, streamlined for everything. In terms of the neurological prep, what are some of the other things that you do?
Sure. So the other one I mentioned was eye drills for just to have a more positive impact on our vestibular system. Um, and so we'll do these little eye drills called isocods, where they are focusing on a specific point, and they're on their with their eyes, and flicking their eye focus from that point to another point horizontally, back and forth as quickly as they
Mm,
can. Maybe the 2 points are like two dots on a wall. Most of the time, I just have them focus on their thumbnails. I have them kind of put their thumbs up together, right next to each other and close to their face. Close, but not too close that they can't focus on those 2 points. And I tell them specifically like the whites of their thumbnails. And so they're starting on the thumbnails and they're going from one thumbnail to the other, back and forth. And they're building the speed. How quickly can they flick one eye
Mm.
from one side to the other and back? And they're building that speed for 60 seconds as quickly as they can. Now, I will vary a couple of things within that 60 seconds. Halfway through, I'll have them switch from a true horizontal eye path, going left and right, back and forth, and we'll go slightly diagonal,
Mm.
and they'll start going diagonally, left, up and down, across and back. And when they make that switch, I'll also, we're doing this out of a staggered stance. So, we got that horizontal eye path, 30 seconds in a staggered stance. I'll have them switch midway through. They keep their eyes going through that switch. They start going diagonal. They switch up their stance. And what's going to occur at the end of that 60 seconds, for most, is they're going to have a positive change mobility wise and strength and power output. And what's occurring, what we're doing with that eye drill, going left to right, is we're facilitating more communication between left hemisphere of the brain and right hemisphere of the brain. And so we're facilitating that communication left to right, left to right, left to right. The duration of that
Mm.
left to right communication is going to help facilitate rhythmic communication between the left hemisphere and right hemisphere. And ultimately, what you're gonna end up with is a positive change globally, mobility wise, strength output wise, power output wise.
Nice.
Um,
Do you have it like
yeah.
do you know any of the sort of figures that support that?
I do not right off the top of my head.
Okay.
I just see.
That's all good.
I think I if I I see, the, like, we'll do like a pre baseline.
Mhm.
We'll do external rotation with their shoulders. We'll do trunk rotation. Um, this is something that maybe if it's a group that we didn't do during the warm up, maybe we didn't have time. But if it's a day where they're doing they're going for a more higher intensity bench press or maybe a higher intensity squat. It's very rare that I max out
Mm.
like a 1 rep max. I'm usually, if we're going, 90% or above, I'm not going. It's the goal is not that 1 rep max necessarily. We're just kind of maybe going for a heavy double. Um, but if it's something that we really got to get geared up for that last set, that last heavy set, maybe we'll do the isocods in between the rest time, right before they hit it. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, that thing goes up. Even if
Nice.
before it felt like it was like, oh shoot, that last rep was a grind,
Mhm.
such a grind that I don't know if this next one's going to happen, but we'll see. Uh, it's going to have a positive effect on that. And
Nice.
so I don't have right in front of me off the top of my head any exact studies or numbers utilizing these IceCod drills, but I would honestly recommend just giving them a try
Try. Yeah.
and seeing how, yeah, try them out.
No,
Before you do it. Yeah.
so the way that the reason I'm asking it, so I'm getting really into like cognitive training just now, and this
Yeah.
is depending on how you adapt it. Obviously, this could also be classed as a cognitive drill, specifically
Hmm.
more concussion wise, where all that movement from left to right, diagonals, that could start to bring the brain back around to communicating with each other and communicating with other sides of the body. For me,
Yes.
that's fascinating. That's why I was asking for like if you have any specific numbers, because cognitive training, I think, is one of the ways forward just now. Like I had Thomas Newman on previously, and he kind of mentioned that he uses cognitive training as he's predicting it to be a step further than movement at 1 millisecond per squat per say. So we go double body weight squat. The next would be 1 meter per second, and then it would be focused on a cognitive drill, and kind of like what you were mentioning, that would then
Hmm.
help build up that strength as well.
I mean, we'll even, one another thing we do is we'll kind of just develop uh, just strength abilities in different ranges of motion as well. And so
Mhm.
one of the things we'll do at time, not at times, but oftentimes at the end of workouts, we'll do extreme end range deep lunge positions isometrically for time, um, and throwing in these isocods, these eye drills with that
Mm.
deep end range isometric hold will also have a positive impact on, like, as far as how long they're able to maintain that hold, as far as how well they're able to develop that deep end range strength ability. Um, and so that's another time that we'll work these in as well while they're actually
Mhm.
doing something that's physically taxing.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing as well. So I always say that so any of my athletes, they'll be strong throughout the whole range of motion. So not just like their concentric phase, but I'll get them eccentrically strong and isometrically strong throughout the whole lift. So I'll actually do positional isometrics, and then I'll do eccentrics, and then I'll do concentrics. For that same thing, because sport is so unpredictable, like you can
Yep.
get injured at any of these points, and it's not preventing injuries; it's mitigating the effects of that injury. My athletes, I always try and do some type of mitigation work. If something were to happen, where I think I've only had one hamstring tear,
Mhm.
like they're able to bounce back quicker because they've already established some sort of strength throughout the full range of motion, and when they're back, they obviously they're not where they were, but they can come back a little bit quicker.
No, absolutely. And it's just it helps. This stuff is it's helping. What I found, it's also helping speed up recovery in
Mm,
between our workouts as well. Um, and
100%
it's
that
just
brain
helping
connect,
people.
yeah.
Yeah, there's just like it's you know weaving a lot of these different methods and types of stimulus into the workout is just creating, in my opinion, I believe it's creating a lot more mind muscle connection and a lot more intention behind the movements that we're doing, and it's helping us further ensure that we're stimulating the specific muscle groups that we're truly trying to stimulate and create
Mhm.
adaptation through.
Yeah, off air, we were kind of talking about the isometric work that you did and sort of got from Buddy Morris. Can you sort of take us through that and some of the methods that you use it?
Sure. Yeah. So, like as I mentioned earlier, the summertime is when I start to really dive into continued ed efforts because that's the time of the year where there's the most time to get that done. I'll try to talk to as many strength coaches as I possibly can around the country. It doesn't matter whether it's private sector, high school, collegiate, or professional. And so this past summer, I had the fortunate to be able to connect with Buddy Morris with the Arizona Cardinals. So I took the trip up to Tempe, Arizona, and spent an afternoon with him. And if you never met Buddy, he's an amazing guy, legend in the field, and just amazing when it comes to wealth of knowledge and willingness to share and help other coaches. And so we had we you know met over the course of the whole afternoon. He just, I'll be honest, I
Info
went up
dump.
to this meeting I went up to this this shop talk meeting with him with iPhone note of at least well over 50 questions that I thought were important to ask him. And by the time I left at the end of the afternoon, I probably only asked him three of those questions because the entire time I was more interested in listening to what he had to say. It was just, you know, he started going into their principles up at, with the Arizona Cardinals and how they approach, their player development, how they approach their return to play cases, and how they implement isometrics, eccentrics, fast eccentrics, and dynamic work into their program. And obviously, Buddy was the guy that I was able to talk to the most. However, their director of sports science, Kyle Salmons, he is someone who I have really dove in, as far as like the content and the material that he has put out through podcasts. That's another person that I've really dove into, and that's just kind of gone deeper into what Buddy was starting to talk about as far as isometric work, eccentric work, and the subcategories of that stuff that they implement with their teams. And so Kyle Salmons, his principles. as he's developed it, is he labels as like the beast factory, and it takes a isometric to slow eccentric to fast eccentric to dynamic type of approach, um, and all the different ways that they implement all those different methods. And the basis of a lot of that approach is helping create constraints, if you will, for the athletes so that we can create true adaptation in the areas that we're trying to create true adaptation, and develop positions and strengthen positions. And once we're able to kind of create that adaptation in the intended muscle groups or develop those positions, then we're creating movement with those positions. And it's just basically developing that movement from a kind of a isometric to slow to fast type of
Mm.
movement velocity, or excuse me, force velocity curve.
No, like I mentioned at the start, like I'm fascinated with the isometric build up from basic to complex and how that improves every movement thereafter. Like what a lot of people don't think about is as well is like if you're getting ready to sprint, there's that couple seconds where you're isometrically and then you just explode through. So really focusing on this isometric movement is really
Hmm.
important to build up that strength so you can explode faster, so you can move in a more powerful, dynamic way.
Right. And one thing that Buddy touched on while I was up in Tempe, and one thing that, if you ever look up Kyle Salmons and listen to some of his podcasts, one thing that, they basically communicate is that, if you cannot be isometrically strong in these positions, it's really unrealistic to expect to be strong dynamically out of these positions, or strong in a fast eccentric sense if we're talking like
Hmm.
deceleration or altitude drops. And so kind of developing this strength, or excuse me, developing these correct positions, and then with these positions developing the strength in those positions, that's truly going to be the foundation for what you're trying to build dynamically, or fast eccentrically or dynamically.
100%. And I completely understand when you said that you had like these 50 questions, but you're only able to get three. And I think this is the thing with our industry is like sometimes we get just so caught up on talking that we kind of forget anything else. So fun fact, the podcast used to be like a very structured way of speaking. I had like set questions and I would rattle through them, but I lost some of that
Hmm.
communication and some of that conversation style that we usually have. Say if I come into your
Yeah.
office.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot more free flow and organic and natural, and it's going to result in those incredibly impactful, powerful, informational, and organic shop talk
Yeah,
conversations that us coaches often will have, in the break periods, in between talks at conferences, or the shop talk conversations at the bar after the conversations,
100%.
after the presentations at conferences. It's going to be a lot more like that, which, I feel like those types of conversations are some of the most powerful conversations and most beneficial conversations.
100%. That's why I love this podcast because like I get to speak and talk shop with coaches from all over the world, and it's like expanded on my knowledge base as well. So like I hadn't really dove into RPR before, but now I am because like we had this conversation and it's got me intrigued, and because you use it and you've had success with it, I would be a
Yep.
fool not to look into it as well.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, like, and honestly, like I said, that's just one of the methods that I work into the neural prep work. But they all have a different positive impact on setting them up for optimal
Mm.
performance, whether it's with the training session, practice, or a competition. But yeah, if you get a chance to dive into either the RPR or any of this other stuff, I'd highly
I
recommend
definitely
it.
will.
And I want it, once you kind of start to kind of dip your toe into this stuff, let me know. I want to hear how it goes.
I've actually started doing this with athletes as well, and so like I like this podcast because like I'm always learning. So one of the things I took away from Thomas Newman's podcast was at the end of the session, he likes to give his athletes either 24 or some sort of rep number at a percentage of their body weight of a specific exercise. And it's tough and it's grueling, but they get to decide how they structure the set scheme, right? So say they've got 24 reps and at 80% of their body weight for a squat, how are they going to give themselves sets? Are they going to do like 5 sets until they get to 24? Are they going to give themselves like 10, 5, and then whatever's left? Like, how will they structure it? And that usually tells them and shows them like how they're able to push themselves through those hard moments as well.
Hmm. And you said it's a fixed everybody kind of has the same
Yeah, so
percentage of
if
their
it's in a
body weight
group,
that they're
everyone
working
will
on.
have the same exercise, same percentage,
Okay,
same, and then they get to pick their rep schemes and their set schemes.
gotcha.
Ray Zingler has a brilliant one as well, where he gets their athletes to carry something heavy as shit, and they have to do that however many times, and it's building that resilience to even if it gets tough and shitty, you can still push through it.
Sure, sure. I don't have that exact type of protocol, but I have a couple of protocols within a lot of my programs that kind of implement that type of approach that allow them to
Please share.
kind of be, huh?
Please share.
allow them allow them to basically kind of be the be the guide of their how they're going to finish out their workout and how intense it's going to be, and what it's going to take. So it's if it's an upper body day, towards one of the end of their towards the end of one of their upper body days. This is for the track and field sprinters. uh, you know we do incorporate a lot of pull up and chin up work, and so we work on that relative body strength, um, or relative strength. And so we'll at the very beginning, maybe week one, we're testing how many pull-ups we can do. I do pull-ups for the men, I do chin-ups for the ladies. um, However many pull-ups they're able to do, we take that number and we multiply it by 2.5. And so they take their, by the way, I got way back. I got this protocol from Joe DeFranco.
Okay.
He's one of the first guys that like I really followed and learned a ton from, and kind of like gravitated towards when I first started my coaching journey. But you know, so we'll take that chin up or pull up total and we'll multiply it by 2.5, and that number is their total chin up or pull up volume that they need to accomplish before they
Mm,
leave. They can break it up however they want, but that's what we're hitting. And so some of them will hit, sets of 10, some of them will hit sets of 5, maybe they'll break it up threes, but they're trying to get as many done as quick as possible. And they got to be strict pull-ups. Like chin over the bar at the top, elbows in full lockout at the bottom. Nothing halfway or partial.
nice.
And so that's one way that we kind of approach a similar
Yeah, that's similar
uh,
to Thomas.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's one thing we'll do for the upper body, and then lower body wise. Earlier when we were talking about the
Hmm.
isocods, I started mentioning the extreme lunge isometrics. So we'll incorporate those at the end of either at the end of lower body days or at the end of full body days. If lower body has been focused on in that workout, we'll finish with those, because I believe there's a lot of
Okay. Okay.
benefit, not just strength, mobility, flexibility, but also like recovery wise. So they kind
Hmm.
of finish with those. Now some days we might do a fixed set number and a fixed time that they're doing it for. But on some days, at least one of the day of the week, we'll do it where we're just doing one set, one time each leg, and they're going for as long as they can.
Damn. Like
And
shaky, feel
that's
almost collapsing.
intense.
Yeah.
That is intense. And the way we set these up, and by the way, I got this method. I picked up this method from a guy by the name of Dan Fichter. He's a performance coach in the private sector. He works out of upstate New York. And he is, if he's not someone you already have heard of or have on your radar, I highly recommend getting him on your radar. He is a phenomenal
How do you
guy to
spell his name?
follow and check out. Dan Fichter,
F
Fichter.
I C H F
And
I N C H.
so it's Dan, Dan,
Yep.
and then the last name is Fichter, Fichter. And if you're looking on Instagram, his Instagram handle is wanna get fast. It's all just one word, wanna get fast. That's his performance facility. But he is, uh, the stuff that he does, it's incredible. He implements a lot of neurology into
Mm.
his performance training.
I'm telling you,
He's
this
also the guy
cognitive
that
stuff is going to fucking be the way forward.
it's a game changer. I mean, I personally believe it's if it's not the last if it's not the last frontier in performance training, it's one of the last frontiers in
Mm.
performance training.
I'm
And
one thing.
I think it's just so different from what we are used to as strength coaches. I think um, it can be a little, if you're looking at it from the outside in, it looks a little foreign. It
Mm.
looks a little,
Out of the
I
box.
think maybe goofy at times, out of the box, off the wall, but there is something to this stuff. And
Yeah.
you are suddenly if you start to implement, these types of, some of these methods that Dan talks about, or other coaches that, I've talked to have talked or have worked in, you are starting to impact the body on a whole nother level. And it's just moving the needle forward with all the other stuff that you're already doing. And it doesn't even have to change your philosophy or
Hmm.
principles or program. It just makes everything a little bit better.
Yeah. So I'm a principal guy as well. I was fortunate enough to be mentored by Coach Ron McKeefery, and that's
Yeah,
his whole thing is like theory method is cool, but let's stick to the principles and really make sure that they're solid. And that's something that I really go off of is like let's look at what the athlete needs and make sure that they have their buckets filled. And I've spoke to Tracy Zimmer as well. She's at Florida and
yeah. I've talked to her too.
she's
Yeah,
so sick.
I reached
She
out to
came
her
on the
one time
podcast.
to talk about swimming prep.
Yep. She's so dope. But we kind of connected on this principle that we're our own best guinea pigs. So
Yep,
anytime that you have this crazy theory, experiment on yourself, see what happens. Then you can start feed dripping it to your athletes, see how that happens, and then you can sort of build out these principles that you've sort of made up on your own. One thing that we sort of spoke about
absolutely.
is
Yeah.
for me, I'm a little bit deranged sometimes, so I'll just do something and see what happens. A couple of
Likewise.
years, it's the best. Like you, we know
Yeah.
what we're doing. We know how far
Oh,
we can push.
I'm 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 gonna be a guinea pig for whatever I do, and honestly, I'm gonna use myself and probably a couple interns as guinea pigs before I start actually officially working it into a program.
100%.
But yeah,
So, like, what I did was a couple of years back. I spent one whole month doing like 50 pull-ups every single day, just to see what would
okay.
happen. My lads got juicy. So I'm
I bet.
happy. But like it taught me that consistency thing of like I have to go in every day and do 50 pull-ups, and it sort of just developed this habit of like let's see how far we can actually push it. So we're back. We were talking about being each other our own guinea pigs and how that can drip feed into our athletes and programs and really drive that principle based that we both like to focus on.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was I'm kind of leaning into this thing where I take a VBT device and do some cognitive drills, and I
Yep.
want to see how that impacts performance, and then slowly drip feed into my athletes. Because I think if we went from double our body weight and trying to move it fast, and then we went to 1 meter per second trying to move that specific percentage to then introducing cognitive, how can both work together?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, or I guess my question is then, are you thinking like as far as like during a workout?
Yeah, yeah. So the way I structure programs is very similar to what we did at UW, depending on which sports, obviously. But I go of a 4 to 5 tier system. There's usually four exercises in between: main lift, secondary, and then accessory work. And that's how I sort of fill out the program. So
Yep.
with the main movements, VBT and that, performing like a quick cognitive task like turn the card around or look at some form of iPad stuff, and then go into your secondary, go into your accessories, and then seeing over time how that would develop strength, power, and the
Yeah.
metrics that we can get from a VBT.
Yeah, I have not played with that type of approach within a workout utilizing like VBT. I have messed with working cognitive drills or neural prep drills when it comes to when it comes to testing with force plates. I have
Mm,
done that, and so like I'll have maybe one or a small handful of athletes perform a some one of the tests on the force plates. We have evolved force plates at U of A here, and so maybe we'll do a counter movement jump. Maybe we'll do an RSI 10 hop test. Um, but we'll do that test. We'll take we'll then break away from the plates to do a quick neural prep drill, and then we'll do that test again. And I'll look at either peak power outputs. I'll look at any potential changes in asymmetries, left side to right side. I'll look at eccentric metrics. Um, it's been, what I've found has been a bit interesting. I've seen improvements in as far as deficits between left side and right side.
mm,
Maybe it's not like 100% like, oh my gosh, we're great, we're perfect, we're symmetrical, but there's some noticeable improvement when it comes to strength deficits or stability. um, I see benefits, I see improvements with that, concentric phase and the peak
mm,
power output. uh, I'll see even improvements with the eccentric metrics. I'll usually see the most noticeable improvements if it's someone who's brand new to RPR,
mm.
or if it's someone
Like
who's
the early
brand
adopt,
new.
yeah,
What's that?
like those early gains.
Yes, yes. Or someone who's like, maybe it's not RPR, maybe it's we're just working in eye drills, or maybe we're working in something else, playing with our reflexes. Uh, and so if it's someone who's maybe on the newer side to some of this stuff, what I've noticed is there's going to be a more noticeable effect with those people
Mm,
versus like with like say a freshman or an incoming transfer versus someone who's been in my been training with me for 2 or 3 years, and they've been incorporating these neural prep drills into their training for multiple years now at this point. Like there's
yeah.
the prep drills, they're still going to have a benefit to them, to the training, but it might not be like on a force plate, it might not be as visible metric
Mhm.
wise, numbers wise, as far as
Yeah.
before and after.
That's quite interesting. So we've talked about like the imbalancement that happens with athletes and how they kind of cheat their way through movements. It's sort of making sense to me because you can sort of see like these neural prep or neural fatiguing exercises will fatigue them to a point that they essentially forget to act like to cheat essentially
Oh
because
yeah.
they're that fatigued. That's how I'm making sense of it, really.
So what would for you then? What would be an example of something that's getting them to that level of neural fatigue? Something that
So
you
I
guys are
think
doing.
no, no. So this is what from what you've just said. This is what I'm
Oh, I'm
sort of
sorry.
trying to piece together. No, it's all good. So like what I mean is by performing these mentally fatiguing tasks, they're essentially forgetting that they have these imbalancements that they need to sort of mask, and they're going. That's why that might increase, if that makes sense.
The
So
increase
like,
the outputs,
yeah, yeah.
or gotcha. Yeah, I don't. I'll be honest. I don't know if it's a matter of them forgetting, or or what? When we're doing the test and then we perform the neural prep drill, whether it's the eye exercises or the RPR and stuff, and then we have them retest. Um, I can't say that I'm during either the pre or the post test. I'm not telling them focus on one thing or focus on
Mm,
another thing or try not to do this. I tell them how to perform the test and I just kind of let them go.
yeah,
And I don't even tell them what I'm kind of keeping an eye out for, I guess if that makes sense.
yeah. I don't
I
think
just,
I explained it right.
oh, okay.
So I'll try and word it differently. So what I mean is like you've am I right in saying that when they were jumping before, you found a certain degree of difference between left and right, and then after you found a different sort of number
Yes, like the deficit between the two, the asymmetry is less
after?
after
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
we've
So
done the neural prep drill.
okay, I understood that wrong. I thought you said it the other way around. That they
Oh,
were
okay,
at a
okay, okay.
level, and then afterwards they're at a different level. And the way that that made sense in my head was that because they'd done these mentally fatiguing tasks that tired them out, that balance went a bit skewed. That's how I took it. That's my bad.
Gotcha. No, I probably explained it overly complex or
Nah, it's
overly.
all good.
I
It's all
probably
good.
miscommunicated it. But
No, no,
yeah,
no.
no, I see that. I see an improvement in asymmetries, like less asymmetry, less
Mhm.
deficit, strength, power, whatever during the post test.
Yeah, that's
But how
interesting.
much of a difference? Like I said, how much of a difference? I typically will see more of a noticeable difference with the ones that are a little bit more newer to this stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
the seasoned athletes, the ones that have been in my training with me for multiple years now, they've been doing these neural prep drills. They've been doing the RPR and the eye exercises for enough time now that like it's kind of the optimal state that they are creating from these methods
Mhm.
is now becoming their baseline,
Yeah.
and
I
we're
think
just keeping it as their baseline.
yeah, that's something that we've spoke quite a bit about in this podcast. Is like the older the athlete is, the less improvement margins that they can actually achieve throughout a single year. Like a one
Yeah.
percent increase in performance is fucking unreal for an elite level athlete.
Yeah.
So like, these newbie gains happen quick and often during their first sort of year, but then it
Mhm.
starts like slow down, and then it's that whole thing of okay, this is still working because you're still improvement, although it's not as big as the previously, but you are still improving, and that's something that we need to keep pushing through.
And it doesn't mean that, with the upperclassmen that we're, working in with the neural work, it doesn't mean that the neural work stops working or isn't working for them anymore. It's just, it's become their new baseline. And it's just, continuing with this stuff. It's just helping ensure that we're keeping an optimal, you know, we're keeping our deficits and asymmetries in an optimal place where it's not getting out of control, and we're at least starting off our training sessions in a more optimal place
Yeah,
so that we're not continuing to just train that asymmetry or that strength deficit more. We're just getting a little bit more on a more even playing field, left side to right side, whether it's mobility, strength, power, what have you, so that when we do go to train, you know, we're training in a more symmetrical, optimal place.
yeah. I'm always
And
fascinated.
the goal is not to necessarily be completely symmetrical with
Mhm.
some of these athletes. I mean, baseball, tennis, um, you know, they're kind of inherently like asymmetrical sports, and we probably I we probably don't want them perfectly symmetrical because then that's probably going to actually have a negative effect
Mhm.
on their performance. But you know, something that's we don't want to get that asymmetry out of you know
Yeah,
let it get out of control.
I think that's an important point as well. Is like some of these athletes, like you kind of want them to, you don't want to change too much of their movement patterns because that might actually impact their playing ability.
Yeah,
With your sort of track and running type athletes, what's the sort of protocol or mitigation that you do for hamstring tears and injuries in general with the posterior chain?
sure. So like if we're talking specific hamstring, how we're attacking our hamstrings right now, we're attacking them right now with isometrics
Mm.
right out of the gate. Um, and again, I go back to the principles and then the methods from those principles that I picked up and learned from Buddy Morris and Kyle Salmons up with the Cardinals. We're through the isometrics. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to be doing a couple things with that. We're making sure that if there's any weakness in the hamstrings, we're going to make sure that we're getting to that weakness. Or if we have an area that's been previously injured, we're going to make sure we're getting to that area and strengthening that area so that we're actually creating adaptation in the areas that we're
Mhm.
truly trying to get to. Now, if you listen to some of the podcasts that feature Kyle Salmons, one thing that you may hear him talk about is something called stress shielding. And so it's basically like the body, one way the body is compensating for a weakness or an area that's been previously injured. And so the
Mhm.
neuromuscular system is put into place this shield, if you will, that's protecting that weak spot or a previously injured spot from having to be worked or having to be called upon to accomplish the task or get stimulated. And through isometrics, we're going to kind of break through that stress shielding, if you will, to
Mhm.
fatigue the muscles that are taken over for that spot and get through to that exact area of the muscle that in this of the muscle is in this case the hamstring, so that we can actually start stressing that area and creating adaptation. And one of the things that Kyle Samus talks about is that isometric will often take longer than you might think to be able to break through
Mhm.
that stress shielding. And he'll say like usually it's at least 30 seconds, sometimes
Wow.
more. And so how I've applied it to my hamstring development work right now is that we'll do isometrics and we'll do 30-second holds. And if we're talking, say in the case, let's use a hamstring curl machine for example, we might do 3 sets of 30-second holds on the hamstring curl machine, but each of those sets we're performing that 30-second isometric hold at a different angle. So for example,
Mhm.
set
Mhm.
one, we're at the we're going at the top position, we're squeezing that pad to tight to our hamstrings or to our glutes, and so we're at as tight of an angle as we can possibly get it, and we're actively squeezing throughout that 30 seconds. They got 30 seconds there. Then set two, they're hitting right at about 90 degrees, that midpoint angle of knee flexion for 30 seconds. And then set three, when they come back for set three, they're going above 90 degrees. So that there's still knee flexion in the position, but it's past that halfway 90-degree position where we're creating that isometric in a long lever
Mhm.
position. And that's just one of the ways that we'll work it in. Um, and I've been working that in with my track and field sprint groups this summer, the voluntary groups. I've been, it's going to be a part of many of my other groups, like especially the women's tennis team. But that's how we're going to get things going with the hamstring development. And once we kind of work through a few weeks of isometric work, then we're going to start to work in long, slow eccentrics.
Mhm.
So now, instead of those, we'll just stay on the example of the hamstring curl machine. Instead of 3 sets of 30 seconds where we're hitting a different angle at each position, we're going to utilize a slow eccentric method that, you know, Buddy and Kyle Salmons work in with their guys called EQYs. And so it's a very, very slow eccentric all the way down. And so they're basically going to start the hamstring curl machine at the top angle, and then they're taking 40 seconds to slowly lower that position all the way out to full extension.
Damn, that sounds brutal.
It is, but it's very powerful. It's and basically as long as here my parameters are like for isometrics, as long as you can hold the position for the duration, you can load that thing up as heavy as you can.
Mhm.
As long as you can keep that perfect position for the full duration, load that thing up. And then for the EQIs, the extreme quasi isometrics, for the slow eccentric work that we're doing, you just load that thing up as heavy as you can handle while still maintaining that slow, consistent speed all the way down.
Mhm.
And so you're hitting, we go through that phase of hitting the long duration isometrics. Then we're going to go those slow eccentrics, which is going to start to now incorporate greater ranges of motion during the set at very, very high intensities. Um, and we're just lowering that way as slow as we can under control. And now we're starting to hit those areas in more ranges of motion.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And like it goes back to the point that we were making. Like we need our athletes to be strong throughout the whole range of motion, as opposed to just very specific targeted movements. Yeah.
And the eccentrics allow us to load it up pretty heavy, honest. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, like we're eccentric, we're stronger eccentrically 20 to 40% in a lot of cases
Mm-hmm.
than concentrically. And so we're gonna be able to get a lot of its high intensity stimulus through that full range of motion.
100%. I as well. I've seen a couple videos that really like it, and it's that method of overloading the bar into a way that you essentially want them to get up to, just so the body knows exactly how much that weight feels and handles. So, like,
Yeah,
if you're just like standing up or re-rack, like unracking a squat that's like 10, 20 kilograms over what you can actually do, but you're still your nervous system is still feeling that, okay, this is what this weight feels like. I like
yeah.
that.
And so in that example, are they just standing up with it and just standing with it and just feeling it?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I wouldn't get them to move that bar any way, shape, or form. Like
sure.
if something happens, they're that much off the rack, they can just drop it, or they
Yep.
can just like ping forward. I'm not getting them to walk. That's we probably all know a coach that does that, and he's very popular on Instagram, and I fucking hate him. But that's, yeah, we just stand up, get them to feel that nervous system, get feel for that weight for that bar, and then just put it down. Couple seconds, hold, drop.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely going to have a very high intensity stimulus to the neuromuscular system, and that's definitely going to provide a difference, a new stressor that they're not used to, and something that
Hmm.
they can create. You can create. That's an option. That's a method that you can create an entirely different adaptation to if we're really trying to starting to get them used to those higher intensities
Hmm.
that they've never experienced before.
100%. What's your PR song?
What's my PR song? Um, honestly, it depends on the day. It depends on the mood. I'm all over with the genres that I enjoy. I enjoy hip hop. I enjoy 90s hip hop. I enjoy, you know, hip hop from today. I enjoy rock, alternative rock. I would say the biggest ones, if I'm hitting a PR, it's gonna be either something by probably NWA, or it's going to
Okay.
be something by Rage Against the Machine.
Nice.
So
Okay. Okay.
it's, if it's uh you know I could probably go with almost anything NWA. Just hit, pull up NWA radio, and
Hmm.
it'll get the job done. And then Rage Against the Machine, maybe we're doing uh Calm Like a Bomb.
Ooh. Okay. Nice. One that doesn't get mentioned a lot of, and I think it's very important. What's your conditioning playlist
What's my conditioning playlist? Um, Geez, for my athletes, for myself,
for yourself?
for myself, I am probably going with 90s hip hop, 90s or early 2000s hip hop. So we're getting Dr. Dre. We'll still have some NWA in there. We'll get Eminem, but we're gonna get that early
Yeah.
2000s
The Eminem.
Eminem that would never be that probably would get a lot of flack these days for the stuff that he was working into his lyrics back then. But
The
man,
one that's getting canceled today.
yeah, like early 2000s Eminem was hard.
Yeah. What's some piece of advice that you would give new strength coaches coming into the industry or wanting to come into this industry?
Yeah. Never stop learning. Never ever stop learning. Um, Expose yourself to as many different types of training approaches, methods, or principles, methods. You know, Try to dive into as much of it as you can. Even dive into the stuff. that you, on first glance or first look, you feel like you don't like, or you don't agree with, or you don't see the point in. I think there's a lot of power in that. If you don't like something, like, figure out why you don't like it.
Mm.
Because what I found is there have been many things over time where I made a quick judgment on something, and then down the road I learned more about it, and I was like, oh, well, that makes more sense. I get that. Yeah, I can get behind that. Maybe I'm not going to program it for my athletes, but I get it. Um, yeah, I think just there's so much out there that you can learn, and there's so many great coaches and great minds that you can learn from. I think it's important that you are actively and aggressively trying to seek out information and trying to learn and develop yourself as a coach, uh, as much as you possibly can with intent. Um,
The intern part of that is really important because, like,
yeah.
and Coach Mark does a great job of this. Like, during his internship, we have like designated classroom time where we learn days to Z's of this industry. And like, one of the things he does is like he gets us to do a 10-minute presentation on a topic that we don't necessarily agree, and we have to fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose CrossFit. I hate CrossFit. I don't like what they do in terms of getting athletes, again, not even athletes, getting people to perform Olympic weightlifts that they've never done a day in their life. It's not something that you
Mm-hmm.
can do day one. Olympic weightlifting is hard. You can teach it quick, but teaching it correctly is hard. So for me, I was like, I hate CrossFit, so I'm going to write about that. So I had to fight for it. So what I came up with was it's good camaraderie. Like, it helps people become a little bit more consistent with their workouts. Great for relationships. Like, if you go into CrossFit, they're very supportive of everyone. So that helps people get like that incentive to keep going back because they get to see their friends, they get to see this community that they've built, and essentially, like, you're still learning to move fast as well. Which, as we grow old, that's one of the things that we stop doing. We stop jumping, we stop lifting heavy, we stop doing a lot of things. So it helps you
Mm-hmm.
with that too. And like for me, it that specific exercise taught me to read something, even if I completely disagree, because there will still
Yeah.
be some points that I might be able to transfer into something else.
And it's also going to help you solidify your understanding of the reasons why you don't agree with it too, because that's important.
100%.
I mean, not liking something just because you don't like the optics of it, or just
Yes.
at first glance, like, I get it. I've had moments, I've had times like that too, but it's important to truly understand, like, why you don't agree with something.
Hmm. It's always like I always try and play devil's advocate with myself. And like, if I'm really into something, and that used to be the same with deadlifting. I used to like deadlift was like the goal. Like, everyone had to deadlift. But like, the more that I read into it now, like, the risk to reward ratio is a little bit iffy. So I'm not going to deadlift everyone. I'm
Hmm.
just going to either trap bar deadlift them, which is a little bit safer. I'm talking straight bar. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. But it's not the end all be all. Like, I will no longer die on a hill just cause. I will see why I don't like it and see if I can find anything that might actually change my mind too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. I appreciate you for coming on today. Um, if you
Oh,
can let
hey, thank you
everyone
so much
know,
for having me. This has been great.
it's all good. If you can let everyone know where they can contact you and sort of see what you've got going on.
Sure. So I do have a presence on the Instagram. They can find me at coach underscore Ben H. Or they can reach out to me via email. They can reach me at benhollander at arizona.edu. Yeah, I'm always happy to help. I'm at, anytime anyone has any questions or just want to, like, shop talk, I'm always down. So yeah, anything I can do to help people and push things forward.
Perfect. Appreciate you.